United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Somebody put it on the wrong side.
You guys switched those around on purpose, didn't you? See who was paying attention.
That's right. It was this way in the city council meeting the other day too.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, approval of the minutes. Anyone have any comments, corrections? Oh, roll call, yeah, we gotta do roll call.
Carl Hayes,
Here?
Dave Amspoker,
Present.
Scott Brackett,
Here.
Charles Burrows,
Here.
Mike Finnegan,
Here.
Tim Gerlich,
Here.
John Stutzman,
Here.
and we have quorum.
Okay, now, minutes. Anybody have any comments, corrections? No? Have a motion? Whoop.
I found a couple grammatical errors.
Does it change the meaning of what's there?
No, it makes the sentence make sense.
Well, then I guess we can check that. Where's it at?
On page 2, under airport development, maintenance and projects. The third line down, has a draft agreement and we awaiting. I think the word "are" should be in there.
Okay,
And on page 3 of 7, I'll pick that one since it was mine.
Okay, the very bottom paragraph, it would be the fourth line down. He believes or left to believe. Was left to believe.
Pardon me, sir, you're asking me to strike he believes?
No, if he believes or was left to believe.
Oh,
Very minor.
any others? Unless I can read that word in it and don't even notice that it wasn't there.
Very minor.
Okay, we have a motion with those corrections.
I'll make that motion.
I second it.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I abstained since I wasn't here to recognize any corrections.
that's appropriate. Okay, those wishing to address the Airport Advisory Commission need not request permission in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time pursuant to ARS 38-431 et al. And there are copies of the agenda and request to speak, but you don't have to do it up there. All right, reports. Business Park staff report.
Is this on?
Push the button. Oh,
Okay. Good afternoon. Just have a few quick updates. We recently completed our second land sale out at the industrial park. We did 2 acres of land on the corner of Olympic Drive and Mojave Airport Drive, and the city received we received $96,000 in sale proceeds.
which corner is it?
It's the if you're going up towards the airport on the right. So it's Olympic Drive, not Olympic.
And
Way.
it's past Olympic, on the corner, on the opposite side of Olympic. It's not part of Big Lots.
No.
So it's on the same block as West Coast.
Correct. Okay. The last sale that we did prior to that took about 4 months. We did have some easements that we had to work through, but this sale took roughly 2 months from the time that we got the project in and we completed the sale. So, that was pretty exciting to move a project like that quickly through the process. Currently, got another application for a land sale that I'm working on, as well as we have one very interested party, but we are not at the application process yet with them. So that's the update on the land sales.
Can you explain who bought it and what they're gonna do?
Sure, if you'd like. It's, the company that purchased it is Import Corner. Import Corner currently operates out there. They're gonna be expanding. They're gonna open up a new facility there, and they're gonna do, some manufacturing out of that new facility. I don't know, what they're gonna do with their current facility. I believe they're probably gonna remain, keep it, for storage, capabilities. And then, a potential there for, future lease, maybe with another industry or another business. So, in regards to other updates, we're finalizing the economic impact study for the airport and the industrial park. We've got the rough draft back on that. And so we're gonna make some edits to that, and within 2 weeks, we'll have that report out. We also are finalizing an opportunity zone prospectus, which includes 2 sites at the industrial park, of city-owned land. And, we hope to have that out, by the end of this week.
Bennett, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the opportunity zone benefits applies to lease ground in addition to purchase ground.
Correct.
Okay.
It does.
And do you have a good bit of aviation, things that would attract an aviation business to Kingman? And I'm wondering what that says. I know what you can say about an industrial
So in regards to
park.
the opportunity zones and aviation businesses, is that your question?
Well, no, just in general, how is this study going to support bringing aviation businesses into the airport?
So the opportunity zone prospectus it just lays out, basically, the properties at the airport and the rate of return that a potential investor might get if they were to invest.
No, but I'm referring just to the study, what it says about aviation business land, and how is that?
Is this the impacts?
Well, that's the other one, that's study.
So we did two studies. The economic impact study was in regards to the industrial park, what those businesses bring
Right.
to the community, to the area in regards to the current jobs that they produce as well. And there will be some aviation businesses as part of that. It's not necessarily a marketing document that, is going to be targeting other aviation industries. It can be to some regards, because you will have aviation industries in that. And so we'll be talking about the fact that we have aviation industry already operating out the industrial park.
Now, are the aviation industries included in the economic impact?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Is that? And so that's pretty much my update. I can, when we get to old business, talk about the website, if you guys have any questions on that with Tim's update.
Since you're the key man on that, I know you've got other things you need to do.
Well, no, I can hang around.
Huh?
I'm gonna be here, so.
Well, we can do it right now, if that's
Okay.
okay with you, Steve.
All right. So you wanna do an update, and then I can, you got any questions?
Well, I did, regarding the website, I did receive your email, Bennett, with the process outline, I guess is the best way to phrase it, from the contractor that'll be working on it. And with that, we'll be able to start formulating some of our suggestions and thoughts to share at, I guess there'll be a future upcoming planning date or planning session to discuss some of those things. Is that to be scheduled yet?
Yeah, that's correct. We're gonna schedule those. I think the main walkaways from the meeting, we have a target date, and these things do take time, and they've got this a scheduled target launch date of the website for the middle or the end of January, from the time that we just started the process to finalizing the website. during the committee or when we sit down, we're gonna talk about content. What do we wanna see at the website, the color, we've gotta come up with a URL, you know, when we search, what are we gonna search for? You know, all those, discussions need to take place.
Okay, is there any projected timeline on that part of it starting? As far as the
I believe they're gonna be, sending me a survey, and I'll forward you that as soon as I get it. I would think within the next week, you should have that. And
Okay.
then the next step will come right after that.
All right, yeah, if you could just advise us of that, we'll
Yeah.
work with you on that. Thank you on that.
And now just so I know, Tim, it's you on the committee, and then who else do I need to be forwarding any emails to in communications?
Michael Finnegan is on
Okay.
that, and Paul Gaines are the three people on that.
Okay. And were you able to forward that off to those?
Yes, sir.
But
Okay.
does that, we talk about website, that's what it says, but it also talks about social media.
I have an
which is-
update on that. That's
okay,
separate,
all right,
separate
I'm
thing.
rushing
But
up, sorry.
okay. Regarding the social media thing, try to encapsulate, I was a little dismayed that it was brought up for a fairly extensive discussion at the last council meeting this Tuesday evening. I had somebody send me at 6 a.m. on Tuesday a screenshot of some things on what were on the agenda. And so I took off work early to come back here from Las Vegas so I could be here when it happened. I have a whole page full of notes, but I'm not going to read them all here. Basically, Colleen, who is the information officer for the city, gave a presentation on both examples of the work that she does for the city, including social media. There was some discussion on policy changes regarding different entities that are part of the city, and that they are trying to draw down the different number of sites and things for different city entities to be on social media and websites and such. Unfortunately, after multiple attempts, as mentioned at the last meeting here, nobody ever contacted me to discuss anything. Instead, a lot of statements were made about presumptions about what we're being asked for without any dialogue whatsoever. So it was a bit frustrating to sit in the audience and listen to comments made by the city manager about how we couldn't just do this and we can never ever do that without ever any discussion whatsoever. And all we wanted to do was have a dialogue about how we would go about doing something. And I specifically in my messages, both written and verbally that I left, said we wanted to learn about the process. So the only way I've learned about the process was to attend a meeting that none of us were told about, where it was discussed, and thanks to a concerned citizen that brought it to my attention. So at this time, I'm not pursuing the social media portion of this at all, unless I'm asked by the airport manager, Mr. Johnson, for help on it. I will gladly help, and so will other people, but I'm a bit frustrated just to be told why all these bad ideas can't be executed without even getting a chance to discuss it. Nobody asked us a single question about it. Instead, they gave a whole presentation and then went down a road of no, basically, I paraphrase, no private citizen ever gets to do this. We didn't demand anything. We just asked for policy direction. It was never shared with us. We can't misspell things. Statements of that type were made during the meeting. And for somebody that is doing this as a volunteer effort and putting time and effort into it like all of us do up here, it's just really frustrating and it's very discouraging. I've heard comments from other commissioners on other commissions that they feel the same way. So at this time, I am not pursuing that whatsoever unless Mr. Johnson asks me to do it. Because that's what we were told the quote was, it is within Steve and his team's power to do this. So that's where it's left out on that.
Mr. Chairman, I watched the video of the city council meeting last night, and I think most everybody on this commission has upper-level degrees, some masters, and I think there's a Juris Doctorate on this committee as well. I doubt seriously we're gonna have a problem with misspelling, as was implied. The other thing I wanted to ask Mr. Brentley, so far this year, we've had 2 land sales? And what's the total income from those 2 land sales?
I believe the one land sale was 310,000, and the one that just closed was 96,000.
So, a little over 400,000?
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Gary. I got an email that there was a meeting that involved the airport, the meeting that Tim is talking about. I called the city clerk's office. The city clerk told me, well, we don't understand how that's true because it's not on the agenda at all. And I have from the workshop that you were at, where the city manager said anything relating to the airport, certainly the chairman of the commission should be there and other commissioners so they're available to ask questions. I don't know what happened. I mean, I'm astonished there was a meeting that I never heard about. In fact, the clerk even said that wasn't on the agenda. So do you know what happened?
What meeting are you referring to, Mr. Chairman?
It was Monday night? Tuesday. Tuesday, last week.
Are you referring to the workshop or the council meeting?
Council meeting, or, I mean, I'm
No,
sorry.
it was, I think it was a workshop beforehand. But there was, I mean, it specifically talked about the airport, and the city clerk said there's nothing on the airport for that day.
I'm sorry, the only meeting, there was a meeting set up with the liaisons to the commissions, but it was canceled long before that, but I don't know about a meeting that related strictly to the airport that we did not have a meeting to the.
The water issues were the vast majority of it, but apparently Jamie Steele wanted it on there and wanted to talk about it that day, but I wasn't there. I didn't know anything about it.
If I may, there's 2 parts just to help clarify this. I was sent a screenshot of a PowerPoint presentation that the heading of it said Airport Advisory Commission, and then it had a number of topics below it. It had the date, August 6th. I remember it because I stared at it for a while going, what is this? And somebody said, you're on the commission, why don't you know about it? That's when I reached out to Ms. Ford. They asked the city manager if that could be moved to a later meeting,
time.
and he agreed, and that was the end of that portion of it.
So
yes.
they'll come back again then,
Yeah.
so, all right. I will double check on that.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so have we covered the website? I hope. I guess you're free to run off and get other stuff done, Bennett. Okay, Steve. Airport staff report.
All right. You'll note the fuel flowage the next time around, and actually, I'll ask this question at this point. You'll see we have a full fiscal year there, although we're into the new fiscal year in regards to fuel sold. In the next meeting, I'll have July's numbers. Do you want this to be a running total? Or would you like it to be broken out fiscal year to fiscal year? Because it just dawned on me as I was looking at this thing, it's going to get mighty confusing as this list grows. So any thoughts on that? And again, I'm looking specifically at the fuel sales. The next time around, you'll have a full shot of one fiscal year worth of numbers.
Easiest is to put it in a spreadsheet and run a graph, so you have 2 lines, one green and one red, and you can see 2019, 2020, easy to see where you're at. That's the easiest.
If I could, I think that's a good idea. I think keeping specific numbers like you have here for the current fiscal year is a good way to do it. What we may want to do, or an idea, is just continue with 12 months there. just drop off the 12th month and add the new month.
Okay,
So we see what the last 12 months is, but then have a graph of a history or a trend line for a couple years.
okay.
After that, it's, so much changes that trend isn't always helpful, but that's just an idea, to keep
Okay.
12 months up.
You will, the next time around, you'll have a graph. Thank you for that idea. It all of a sudden dawned on me, I should ask, because,
Also, Steve, if we could maybe see the previous year's month, that way we'll have some idea if it's growing, or sort of like your utility bill, they'll refer to how much electricity or gas you used last year in that month.
I think that's what the 2-year graph will show.
Okay. A 2-year graph would be
Yeah,
great.
it has one line that's a full year, and then you're just going out every month, and it'll be wherever that line ends, and you'll be able to see just a relative. It just gives you a relative. That's all you're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, am I correct that he pays his flowage fee when the fuel's delivered to him?
I believe, I've never asked the question. My assumption has been that he pays, when he pays his monthly rent, is my understanding. I don't think they're cutting separate checks for each time he gets a fuel delivery.
But he must calculate it, and
Yes.
my issue here is, and it's not a big issue, but he takes some pretty big loads, and if you get a load on the 30th instead of the 1st, then it throws the numbers off on a per month basis. It doesn't on a quarterly basis, but it does throw it off a little, and I don't think we should read too much into a 1 month sales. There's usually always something that caused it, weather or
Yeah.
a bunch of airplanes came in that, jets that burn a lot, or the Army brought in 20 helicopters and he doubled his sales that month. So I guess what really counts is, is the revenue kind of moving along or going down or going up?
Right. No, and actually, that's a good point. Yeah, what I recall, he used to deliver his rent checks directly to me. I think he brings them down here because a lot of times I'm off doing other things. And I believe it was always figured at that point. So yeah, I agree that quarterly is probably the better way to look at this as opposed to month, because I don't believe it's that exact, but depending on trends. You'll note the revenues to date, which is 1.285 million, rounding up. And then the revenues, again, listed throughout the year. Expenses year to date, 1,587,063.30. Expenses in June, 186,000, rounding up, and the encumbrances number as well. The other thing to note here is the based aircraft. We've had a number of people basically move on or sell their airplanes. So you'll notice that we're at about 95 based airplanes, and the storage of aircraft, we're currently at 190. On the FAA and ADOT line item there, the master plan grant is under process. Right now, we're guesstimating the third public meeting is going to be in the month of October, probably late October. Better not be Halloween.
Steve, I would like to see a graph on the base airplanes and storage aircraft, because that's closer to dollars and cents the total for the airport than just the fuel.
No, I think we have enough history to where we can put something together on that, that'll show trends.
Also, Steve, how do you find out how many airplanes, say, are stored, like Cassie stores here? Does somebody go out and count them, or do we
Yes.
trust Cassie to report it?
Both. We get a report from Cassie, but we actually have somebody go out and count, believe it or not.
Once a week, once a month?
Once a month.
Okay, so Okay, thank you.
Let's see, back to the FAA Master Plan Grant. Just got Friday the aviation forecasts from the consultant and a cover letter for the FAA, so I'll be reviewing that. The key there is going to be, depending on what that says, that's going to equate over a couple steps into our runway width on the main runway. So I believe C3 is what I saw when I scanned it this morning. I want to verify that that basically means that we're keeping the 150-foot width. We don't want to give that up, because if we do, then our market for large aircraft evaporates.
That's important.
The FAA overlay grant, last week, it was either last week or the week before, time just goes very quickly. I think it was last Monday, got a email from the FAA. They wanted a 4-hour turnaround in regards to, Steve, what are the guesstimated prices for that project? So as you all recall, it was 2.3 million or 2.2. Called the engineer and said, yeah, they want a 4-hour turnaround, which for the FAA is very unique and very unusual. We both figured that this has to do with the fact of supplemental grant funding, so 100%. We got it to them. The number bumped from 2.2 up to 2.6 million. That's based on the cost of asphalt. And in talking with the FAA and talking with the consultant, what it appears, and there's no guarantee to this, so we're betting on the come here, is that the Phoenix Airport District Office went forward with 3 projects to LA. LA will then take those projects and theirs and forward that to DC. The 3 projects for Arizona, and this was for 100% supplemental funding, of which they have 500 million nationally, was our project for the runway. And again, this would be a turnaround if it comes off of 2 months. So within 2 months, we'll know if this is real or not. 100% funding for our runway. I believe there was 10 million for Prescott for a new terminal. They're going to build a new terminal sort of where the parking lot is and their GA ramp. And then the other one was an airport I do not recall the name of, some rural airport in Nevada. But those were the top 3 that they did a project meeting on last Monday that they submitted to Los Angeles that will be going to DC. The dynamic is they're very non-committal at this point because they don't know how the folks in DC are going to react, and they're smart. They're not even going there. The one good thing we've got going here is we're going to continue to move forward. We have the general agreement with the engineer that's been approved by the FAA. I have a task-specific item for the runway project that went off last week, Tuesday, I think it was. So I'm waiting for an approval from FAA for that. Based on that, then I will take both of those back to the City Council here. And the premise right now is we move forward doing the engineering up front, given the fact we'll either get reimbursed 91.06% or 100%, but basically move it forward. If this doesn't take, then the next deal will be probably in April or May of next year, and that would be following the normal grant cycle where it's 91.06%. So either way, I think we're covered, but the bottom line being get the engineering done, show that initiative, and then hopefully that puts us higher on the list with the FAA for giving us free money. Sorry about that long discussion. The draw site, that's in progress. The last estimate I heard was that will be done the end of this month. What will happen is they'll have the sites that need to be remediated narrowed, and depending on the amount of information they get, there might be another band of additional corings that have to happen on the worst site. And then they go into a long drawn-out bloodletting on the federal level. Terminal remodel, this phase is near completion. There's some I won't call them minor, there's some items that are still being worked through. As you've probably all noticed, if you've been to the airport, you can actually walk through the terminal now. Has a bit of a different look to it. The pilot lounge is done. As far as outfitting it, you'll note that that'll be an ongoing dynamic. And then, as I'll talk to here in a little bit, not in this report, there'll be some follow-up projects out there at the terminal. So it's not done, but it's getting, well, I won't say it's getting close, but it's moving along. So this phase is almost complete. One of the aspects of this too is there have been a number of items that have popped up in that project to where we are over budget. So that being the case, to cover our ground, and this might morph a little bit, right now what I'm envisioning is we're going to put the segmented circle project on hold for a year, utilize the money from that to pay for what's currently going on at the terminal. And I say what's currently going on. I'm not getting into another phase, which I'll talk about a little later, about dealing with things on the outside of the building, the grass, and all that sort of thing.
Question.
Certainly.
This phase, does that include the restaurant?
It does not.
It does not.
And the restaurant piece of it will be the restaurant funding that. So that won't be a city dynamic, that will be theirs. And I believe there's been talk about them doing something with some of the furniture outside in the patio and changing that around a little bit. So that's, and I just got wind of that
Address
today.
I talked to Jaime today. She met with Crystal Birch yesterday, day before, was told to go pick out the stuff she wants and buy it. So that's furniture for the waiting area in the terminal, for whatever she wants outside. They still plan on enclosing that. It'll have to be in conjunction with what we do as far as the landscaping outside, and we'll be talking about that in a little bit. And there's been a bit of a management change, and is in terms of who is really in charge of the restaurant. My understanding now is it's Jaime, and there's a woman in Wendy in Phoenix who has some supervision, but then it's Crystal. So I think they can make decisions and move fast and not be a problem.
Let's see, continuing on here, mentioned the
Steve, can I ask you
Oh,
something
sir.
first? On the terminal, are the restrooms getting updated in any way during this whole thing?
Other than the appearance, my understanding is no. I believe that the same square footage, the one item I think you'll notice based on some post-traumatic disorder dynamics from some folks. The men's room will no longer have the swing-in door to where you get to see something you probably don't want to see. So it will be, there'll be a lock, just like there is on the women's room, to where if you're a discriminating person that's using the facility, you can lock the door to where you do not have to suffer through that indignity.
That's kind of the basis of my question, because I've complained about it before where somebody could open a door and see that somebody's standing at the urinal, which is very disconcerting, so.
Yeah, I think we're taking care of that.
Steve, if I might jump in there, Mr. Chairman. We, just as an update on that, as you all know, when we got into that building, I think we got more surprises than we got other stuff. So I've ordered an additional money to be spent. The insulation in the ceiling turned out to be nothing. I mean, literally nothing. And so we're going to blow in and create at least a minimum of an R38 in the ceiling to help with that. And so we ran into some wiring issues, some air conditioning issues, and a number of other things. I really guess if we looked in the long haul and we're looking backwards, Monday morning quarterback, and just tear the whole damn thing down and build a beautiful Quonset hut and go from there. But, you know, we haven't done that. So I don't know if, is it later on, Steve, about the museum arrangements we've made, or should I interject that now?
This is a good time.
Okay, Bill Schilling was kind of managing the project. One thing I want to let you guys know about is the city has hired, or will be hiring in Public Works, a project manager, and that'll be nice, because we've never had anybody to oversee and monitor a project. And so, although this person is certainly capable of doing several projects, it would have even helped here in some of the stuff that we ran into. But there's as Steve noted, there's a counter going in at that far end nearest the pilot's lounge things. It's an old-fashioned counter with 5 of the old-fashioned stools and stuff. It's going to look really nice. It'll be nice for people to sit and observe and even have a meal there if they wanted to. And then the museum arrangements, we identified, and none of this is in the active displays at the Mojave Museum, but everything that we found downstairs, and its numerous items that will really complement that building, including some static displays that were tucked away in the basement with memorabilia. And so there are 3 countertops we've been saving down in Josh's place at the powerhouse. They'll be moved out there. They will secure any of the items, because the agreement will be that anything that has legs or capable of having legs, we will secure, with this arrangement with the museum. We expect that by early next month, the museum will approve the stuff, and we will sign the appropriate paperwork to safeguard these items that come out there. But just to let you all know, these are currently items that are stored in the basement of the museum. They've never seen the light of day for Lord knows how long. So it's pretty nice that we will be able to use them and complement this office space. So I think in the long way, there's other things that we've looked at doing. We thought we had located for a while a new canvas kind of awning cover that would have been to replace that metal cover in the front, which would have given that older look. We still are going to pursue that and some things like that. But Mr. Chairman, what you noted with Crystal is pretty much the plan they've always been on. They're going to handle their remodel piece, the patio and everything, and so I'm glad to see that she's still on board with that. But the air conditioning problems are fixed. The wiring is all up to snuff now, so there's no issues that like we've suffered in the past. We've taken your list from the pilot's lounge and what your recommendations were on what you need to see in a pilot's lounge, and so we will be working to get that thing set up. Hopefully what we're hoping for is that it'll be that technology, but in an old-fashioned roll-top desk, giving them that atmosphere that makes us, a little bit special. So I just wanted to update you on that real quick.
Gary, you have some outlets just below the windows along the one wall near where the stools are gonna go?
Yes.
Is the idea that they set their telephone to charge
Yes.
on the windowsill, or are you gonna put
There's a counter going in there.
There's a counter.
It's an old-fashioned Formica kind of countertop like that many of us may have remembered as a kid that were there, and it's going to be trimmed in chrome, and so the chrome matches the stools, so it has that old look that where they used to do on the counters on the edging. And so there's 4 I believe outlets there, and each outlet will handle 2 of the UCB plugs for cell phones.
Are decisions made yet as far as stopping the UV coming in the lights and affecting the museum?
What we're playing with now is we're going to do something on both of the front doors. We found a picture of an officer, an airman, okay? And we're going to use that, put those on the doors. These are the clear transparencies you've seen downtown with the old photographs. And so I asked Bill to let's experiment with a couple of the windows, because there are some photographs where we could actually do 4 panels of the window. It stops the UV, but it completely lets you look out. But it gives you that look of when you look out on the field, there would be all those 5,800 old airplanes. And so there's some things that we'd like to play with there to think it would just make it a little more special than that. So, and then Mr. Chairman, we'll be addressing along, I guess, with certainly your group, the whole landscaping issue around there, because you had brought up with me the fencing issue and some things like that we're probably going to have to look at some other funding there. But yeah, we did push the budget on this, but I think what happened to us really is that when we found out how bad a shape that roof was in, so that replacement had to take place. And so the building is pretty solid now, and I think, and we just have to address those drainage issues coming off the grass and stuff, so.
Okay, yeah. One other point, I didn't pass this on to you, I don't think, but Mike Pennigan knows a fellow that bought one of the rotating beacons from the museum auction, and I believe he would sell it for $300. Now, whether that's something would be an inside display or something for a museum if it ever gets built later on, I'm not sure. But it might be worth, if nothing else, spending the $300 and putting it down in the museum basement.
Yeah.
Because we know they're gonna have room, and use that, in the future.
We'll certainly look at that. Interesting item we found down there, an observation dome out of a B-17 where an officer used to stand up and then he would give directions on the gunning and stuff like that. It's beautiful condition, I mean, mint, and it was sitting down there and nobody knew what it was for until we picked up the tag underneath and stuff. So, again, I don't know that we're gonna create a full-blown museum, but I think it will certainly make it where people will find it an interesting place to be in, you know, so. Once we got through the wainscoting.
Yeah,
Right, Paul?
yeah.
I'm sorry, that was just a difference of opinions, and I didn't feel quite the same, but who am I? So,
But one thing that I don't know if you've heard, but it rings a bell with me, we're gonna have a B-17 here for a week.
that's what I heard, yeah.
And the idea is we position that in such a way that we get a good shot, either with the sunset behind it or the sunrise behind the airplane. And then on that blank wall above the counter where the stools are, we have that big picture put up there.
Yeah, that would be, again, those would be great shots, because again, that film that they put on there it would solve the UV problem and give us something visual too.
No, I'm talking about the white wall.
Oh, the white wall.
Yeah.
Well, this is where we're gonna have to play with it a little bit, Commissioner. We have a rather large display of a bunch of, it's like the May West jackets and a number of other things that were actually made into a display at the museum. And it's probably a good, maybe 6-7 foot across, and so it's already been done, but it's been sitting down there for, God, 40, 50 years? I don't know. I mean, but it's beautifully done. So we have a lot of stuff like that, but also too, I've asked Josh to find us an antique-looking rack so that we can put in all the appropriate brochures, but again, do it in a nostalgic way, you know, as opposed to just plain old stuff. I think I would really like to see it from a personal standpoint, that everything that we put in there as much reflects that era thing, so to kind of do what we said, you know.
Sure.
Just a couple questions. What are the tools you were talking about?
Tools.
You said tools, I mean, that's what I heard for inside the terminal there, a group of tools? Anybody?
Stools.
I didn't hear tools.
No, the
What?
Stools.
Stools.
Okay, I'm sorry, they're old-fashioned when I say bar stools, like that were in the diners?
Chrome. Like
Got
they-
it.
they
Oh,
had in the-
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
typical-
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Kingman Drug downtown, right here on 4th Street, that's a.
Yeah,
The other thing is, what kind of fencing would have been in front of that terminal restaurant during the war if they had fencing? It wouldn't have been chain link.
Nothing.
no, I think
Nothing.
that this is a discussion we need to have now, where this will be the next phase,
Okay.
you know, of what we're gonna do, so yeah. But, yeah, I think you're right, we just continue to improve it till where it's a very welcoming kind of a place, and so. You know, we still have to think about, you know, looking at whether it comes through a grant or whatever, is we were told, you know, on the tower that it was about $70,000 to bring the tower not up to visitation standards, but up to snuff to where it will live many generations. And so that's something that we continue to make sure it's on the back burner, but it's there, because the engineer had given us that it's a pretty solid facility, but, you know, in order to make it better and preserve it for the future, we're probably gonna have to make that investment, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so other things that, depending on, a little bit of fluidity, with the budget, things we did not take into consideration. We have a cost, estimate for an airport stormwater plan. It's around 15,000 and change, that we need to address, since we've never had a bona fide state legal stormwater plan. Another item that you've all probably noticed, any of you that fly at night, is taxiway Delta is dark. That's because the I can't remember what the power wattage is, but the regulator for that is given up. The manufacturer no longer services them. You cannot get parts. And so that's going to be around $15,000 to replace that. And that's a plug and play. That's not a major issue there, but it's just the cost. The 16-acre cleanup that we've talked about in the past, and again, my premise with both the FAA grant project and possibly some of these other things is going to be we draw from that. So that's going to be on hold for one fiscal year. So we bring that back next year. The other dynamic there is a consultant has told us that whatever the prices were that we got back in 2006, which I think were like $360,000 to clean it up, add 20% to that, which is another $42,000, which gets us into the $400,000 mark. So we need to fine tune that, get the numbers down, and then based on that, see if we can't get a AEDQ grant through the state to help in cleaning that up, because I mean that's getting remarkably painful in regards to cost. Airport hangar occupancy, you'll notice 43 currently are occupied, 6 are vacant. That ties to some of the changes we've had going on out there. 10 in the shade port, no changes there. And you'll note on the waiting list how the numbers there have changed as well. 2 for executive hangars, none for the T hangars at present, and 7 for the shade ports. Jumping into ongoing leasing and those developments, the 5 acres in the flight line, I need to make the time to find if we have a proper survey for the site. I'm assuming we do, because I've heard through the rumor mill that somebody years ago wanted to lease that same site. I'm assuming there's a survey. I need to find out if that's the case. If it isn't, I need to get one. And then we need to work on getting the millings removed. We can do that with the equipment we have and the dump truck we have. Problem is that it's going to take quite a long time because it's a large pile. So I need to talk to our Public Works Department, see if we can't get some equipment out there and we make this happen in a couple days. Rain event drainage, you'll see this come back in a later report, so I'm not going to speak to that right now. Security update, believe it or not, I was out there at 11 o'clock one night where I had to stay up till 12 to make a request through the legislature to use their lawn for an Arizona Airport Management Group thing we do every year, Aviation Day, where we go down and talk to legislators and basically tell them don't take our funds. In the last couple of years, they've listened. So I was out there at 11 o'clock, got to meet our security guy, which was interesting. And being out there that late in the evening, it really is kind of amazing how quiet it is. Yeah, get a life, Steve. Just sort of hanging out at the airport at 11 o'clock at night. Phase 1 on the environmental assessment for the 1,800 acres. I have I guess a map that will be sent over to Gary and sent to Bennett. If we look at it and we like it, then it's a matter of moving that forward. Old trailers, I believe the chair saw a draft letter that is going to go out, return receipt mail, first class mail, and going to be posted on the trailer, giving basically 30 days to get it moved. If it doesn't get moved, it's abandoned, and if it's abandoned, then I offer it up to somebody else, and hopefully it goes off-site. So that whole thing is moving. And then my staffers, the next couple of months, all of us actually, will be doing a number of things preparing for the Air Fest. So you'll see us out mowing back a lot of the brush and the lawns and things of that nature, basically for parking of cars, given the fact that that seems to have taken a life of its own. And again, that event, just to remind everybody, is going to be October 19th, which is a Saturday. And that's all I have for my report at this point. Any questions?
No, I do. Kind of in relation to the fly-in event, but not solely. there's a number of us that are concerned about some of the very large cracks out in the ramp area immediately near the terminal building in the fuel island in that general vicinity. And we're wondering, these are things that were kind of patched up a year or so ago and have all recessed back into very large cracks where some of you can put your whole foot into it. They were significant before, but the repairs have all just sunk down into it. And we're wondering if there's not a temporary kind of short-term solution, if understanding that the permanent solution is a major undertaking, but the fact that there's this, in some cases, multiple inches deep and multiple inches wide gaps in the concrete or in the asphalt, actually not the concrete. And a couple of years ago, we had a visiting aircraft, a B-17, as a matter of fact, that one of our pilots got out of it and basically tripped in the crack, and we were very glad he didn't hurt himself. But now with another event coming up, we have a number of aircraft and pilots and visiting crews that'll be out there, and wondering if there isn't, whether it be somebody, one of our members suggested, if we can't put wet sand down in some of that area that's immediately near, you know, the crack closest to the terminal building, I guess, would be of highest priority. But if there isn't just something to keep people from stepping down into the big giant crack that's out there.
I'll take a look, not knowing what I'm speaking of, the specific crack you're talking about, because there are many cracks out there, some of which I've actually looked at. The dynamic you run into with this is typically with FAA projects, anything beyond about an inch to an inch and a half, they advise that you don't crack seal. The way to deal with it basically is to actually saw about a foot of pavement on either side out, and then get some hot mix and basically put it in, roll it, and do it right. What I can do is look at this and talk to our engineer, send him over some photographs of the worst of these, and actually I'll get together with you and go out and see which ones are the highest priority. And I say that because, it's just better that you show me as opposed to I assume. And then based on that, I mean, if we put crack sealant in there, you're going to put a lot of sealant in, and we're going to have the same problem a year from now. I mean, it is a temporary fix, but it's very temporary given the soil conditions we have here. So what I'd like to do is look at the worst of the worst with you, and then based on that, run some photographs and some linear footage over by our contract engineer, and then find out how we can fix this. And again, if it comes down to we saw cut it out and we put an inch or two of, because we don't have large airplanes typically there, but if we're talking a B-17, that's going to have some weight to it. That might be the better way to deal with it. But again, I'd like to run this by the engineer and basically say, okay, we have this lousy situation. What's your best guess as to a short-term or even a medium-term fix?
Yeah, the more we looked at it, the larger a project it became clear that it would be. But then we decided that probably look at it from a priority issue of what's closest to where people and things may be, which would be near the terminal. I'll be glad to go out there and look at that. Like I said, the more you look, the more you see, and then you start realizing this is a massive undertaking. But I think if maybe narrow down a priority kind of hotspot area that we would like to come up with some kind of solution for, that would be great. Thank you.
Steve, I don't see that kind of cracking in the runways or the roads, but the ramp areas really have a lot of cracks, and they've all been recently redone, at least compared to how often they redo roads. When you get an engineer out here the next time, sure, take him around and say, what's wrong with this? I think they're using the wrong asphalt mix or something that produces these cracks.
I can, with about a 90% percentile sense of this, the engineering firm that works here is the same one that's worked at Havasu. The climates here are really tough on pavement. per FAA and ADOT, they have to use a P41 FAA spec for the pavement. The last 2 years, the amount of oil that goes into that pavement, that has changed just on industry standards. But what they're basically putting down is the same stuff, modern-wise, the last 15 to 20 years, that's supposed to be there. What might have been the case, and I don't know this, I'm making a supposition here, is it's possible that the airport authority, when it was here, wasn't doing as much seal coat sort of projects out there to lengthen the lifespan of the pavement, and hence the fact it dries out, and then you have these cracks that are the size of the Grand Canyon. Yes, sir.
Yeah, they used the PO4 mix. But that area had underground water flows, and when they compacted it, they went down
16 inches?
20 inches and 24 inches almost in some spots, driving it out. And then they put some loose netting. If you looked at it, it'd be kind of like a netting, but that's to keep everything from cracking. They tried. You give that and the PO4 mix when they cut the oils down. You know, you cut it down in Wisconsin, not a big deal. You cut it down where it dries out in Arizona, it's a huge deal. So between the two of them, that's what you're seeing in that area. That area had a different water flow underneath of it, and that was the problem there. The other thing I might interject is if you talk to, not Z&H, but Lance or whoever down
CNS,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking to them, see if our city, I mean, I've seen them out fixing roads, and they have the little smoothing where they vibrate and smooth stuff out, that we could do some in-house, you know, if they had to do it quickly or whatever, that we could do something like that we may have in-house with the city. So that dynamic could come into play, and it's worth asking.
Fantastic. Any other questions or comments?
I've got a question about the taxiway delta lights. When do you have an idea when that regulator would be put in?
There's a comment that's been shared with me, which is one of the reasons this has not happened. We've done estimates, and the thought was that we would get a specialized firm to come out here and do this because it's high voltage. And as I think all of you know, but if you don't know, the system out there is 5,000 volts. So it's, yes. So the dynamic basically is, if you're ever out there and you bust a light or you bust a sign, you call us, don't touch it, don't go near it, because the only thing between you and eternity basically is a $20 light sensor. And mind you, I've been dumb enough to go out and change the little transformers, which will still send you off to Valhalla. But I guess the dynamic here basically was, we were looking at specialist firms that do high voltage. And then I got a comment through staff within the general city that they would like it if we contact local electricians. And so I went on the state contractors board of people that have licenses for this sort of thing, because it's very specialized, as you can imagine. So there are 3 contractors I need to contact in town to see if they have airport experience. If they don't have airport experience specifically, and we're talking recent experience, like in the last 5 years, that throws them out, and then we go to the folks that I was going to use initially, which this is what they do. Because again, it's specialized. Because it's specialized. And so it's just a matter of me making the time to finish up the questions, to give to Janie so she can make the phone calls. And then once I have that data, we put it back open for people to give us quotes. Yes, sir.
Well, is that 5,000 volts just coming from a transformer that steps it up for starting a fluorescent style light, or is it continuous?
Continuous.
Continuous. And that's typical of all airports.
It's a mile long.
Yeah, when you start looking at the distances.
And each light though has a step down.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
but even with those step downs,
Well, I mean, it's step down, but the main power is the 5,000, and you have the 5,000, so you could go the mile long.
You got it, yeah. There was another question.
I'm not.
All righty, thank you.
Committee volunteers. When we had the workshop in June, the city attorney said we can't have subcommittees. And I extensively went through Title 38, and he's correct, you can't have a subcommittee if the subcommittee has a quorum. Then it's a meeting of the commission, because there's a quorum. But without a quorum, that does not apply. No, my first thought is we have a point person and, it's, and not a quorum. But for instance, Tim has a committee with, Mike on it and someone who's not on the commission. No problem at all. You don't have anybody like that that has some expertise, knowledge, willingness to help, whatever it is. So, I analyzed that whole situation, sent a letter upstairs, and I haven't heard back from the city attorney. I think his answer is gonna be, I don't care what you do. I'm not the one that's gonna get in trouble, but I don't know that. He's got a fair amount, from us to process, and I think he's overwhelmed like a number of other people, and that is certainly, true of Steve. So I'll be calling you, and I just had some ideas on who might be best for what, and if that works, great. But we have a lot of expertise, and there's other people I know that that have even more, so we can accomplish a lot that way. And we can't do everything as a commission, and we can't have that many people involved, but to help staff and ask the right questions and go find resources, we can certainly do that. And that's, the comment I got in a private conversation with the attorney, was that we set policy, or we recommend policy. We don't do work, that's staff work. I said, wait a minute, staff can't possibly do all the things that need to be done to make this airport work, at least get it up to where it's working. Where too much was not done. And he said, well, but that's not your job. So that was not left with any solution, but the solution, as far as I'm concerned, is as long as we don't have a quorum, we can function. And that's, we'll make that official next month.
But we can still have workshops, provided we meet the posting and announcements of such workshop.
Yes, it has to be, though, with the posting, and Janie has to be there for minutes, that sort of thing. But it's, you take a couple people who want to go see the FAA under the city attorney's rules, that's a subcommittee, you can't do that. Under what he said, he thinks that Title 38 says. I don't think it says that at all. And so I don't think that's an issue. And you can read Title 38 too. It's not that, I mean, I've read all the Attorney General opinions for 20 years. That's all they put on there. And I can't find anything that says different. Okay, we had the work session with the city manager, and a number of you were there in June. And you have 4 pieces of paper. Out of that meeting, and this is, it's not worth the whole story, but the council's identified priorities is what the council said based on surveys of citizens, what they want the city to do, where the focus needs to be. So anything that we do or recommend in terms of capital investment or policies or whatever that contribute to any of these things, we want to put how does that contribute in it, to it when it goes upstairs. I mean, you tell them, this is what you wanted, we're giving you what you wanted, and here's how it's accomplishing that. And, you know, we have never tried that, my guess is other commissions don't do that either. But to me, that's marching orders, let's show them we're marching. The next one on bullet points, if you were there, you got all of these, which is a PowerPoint, and I'd be happy to give you those if you don't have them. I took the ones that were not duplicates, that were not just plain common sense, that were specifically, could be applied to us on how we should operate. So this is almost something like it should be our a policy statement, and it's just right out of it is from the city manager, and I'm sure the city manager didn't do it unless the city council goes along with it. Some of those obviously have some potential pitfalls. I mean, it's a good policy if it solves problems without creating a political split. Well, you can't always make everybody happy, but you got to follow the law. So there's certain things that we're bound by, and this is just something to think over and keep in mind as you're functioning as a commissioner. And then I believe actually Steve found this. This was a mission statement that I believe the user group put together as a proposal for the commission before it was formed. I went through the minutes and I cannot find anything where we adopted a mission statement. So I'm throwing this out today as a start point because this came from the user group. Let's take a look at that and what's missing, what needs to be corrected, and you can send that to me or Steve, or wait until next month and we'll see if we can't iron it out and take an action and say that's our mission statement. And that'll go upstairs. If the council has a problem with it, they can kick it back. If they're not, we can assume if we're doing this, we're doing the right thing. Okay, the last page. And this is really moving on to new business C. I asked Steve to get us an overhead plan form view of the restaurant and the terminal, so we can look at that from the standpoint of what do we want to do in terms of landscaping, and that's in everything that isn't the building, put it that way. And this all started is just how can we make it better for what's there right now? And a lot of things have become, well, wait a minute, if we change this, for instance, a tower, anything we would do with a tower, that's not coming down. We build a new terminal, we're gonna still have the tower. So anything we wanna do, if we can, we wanna do it with the distant future in mind, rather than just a Mickey Mouse or a short-term outlook. Over a number of conversations, the idea came out that that fence out in front blocks the tourist photographers from taking pictures out there. They get a picture of the fence in their field of view. There's the back of the plywood and sides don't look so good, even though we got them up there and they were better than what we had before, which was nothing. But what if we take and move the pedestrian gates, the TSA gate and the other one, on either side of that building and run the tall fence back where the short fences are, and not have any fence out in the front? And it's just like almost every other terminal in FBO on any airport where the building is the fence. They can come in from at night through a keypad gate, and there's one over at the where they could come around for the cafe. And now we've got an open area in front of there, and I think a little low sign that says, pilots and crew only after, past this line is all that's necessary. I don't think we've got a problem with people are gonna just run out there. They don't at other airports. So that was just one idea. So the idea for what I'm throwing out to you, and Gary talked about this, is a agenda item for the next month. What can we do? What can we do to make this look really nice and attractive? And I'll have to say one more, and it wasn't my idea. We have a arch sign downtown, welcome to Kingman. What if we made the same shape, smaller, lower, just a couple of steel columns that comes up that would never leave? It lines up with a walkway that says, welcome to Kingman, and put the railroad and the Route 66 and a couple things like that. Doesn't have to be lighted, wouldn't cost a whole lot, but you'd never tear that one down. And it fits right in with the one downtown. So those are the kinds of things that I think we could do. And, you know, we have a memorial and a sign for the base that, the memorial's fine, but the other one's falling apart. And, does that belong out in front in the parking lot? It could be redone and put out there. I don't think where it is, nobody sees it. At least not very many people. So there's some more ideas there, and let's make it a concrete relief or something with it. It's more permanent than what's there now. And I don't know when that was made, but it was made right off of a sign that Tim has in his records that was there in World War II. You might take an explanation. Does anybody know why this was the flexible gunnery base? What's flexible? Hey, the guns and the fighters are aimed by the pilot. They're fixed. These guys are flexible. That's what it means. But I didn't know what that meant until I saw some information on it one day. Okay, any comments, questions about that?
Yes.
Put on your creative thinking caps.
On the commission that was formed and everything, and I just like to get this on record that we formed this group because of what's happened in the past 20 years or so and how the airport's been run or not run. And this is all a volunteer position, and everybody here has the same goal, to make this airport the best it can be, the best it has ever been. And it's all for the largest asset of Mojave County. And one of the things I'd like to say that I don't know that anybody's ever said it before, we have combined aviation experience in our commission, which I added up today to 228 years of aviation experience in every aspect you can think of, let alone all the college and training and all the other stuff. So I think that, you know, not to cause any dissension, there's seems to be some sort of blockades we're getting or being stonewalled in certain directions that maybe they're not thinking of it, maybe they're just thinking of economics. But I think they need to look at what our intent is and not look at exactly the numbers and stuff and think about what we're trying to do here and maybe, you know, give 228 years of experience some benefit of the doubt. Thank you.
Okay. D is landscaping improvements along Mojave Airport Drive. This is kind of similar. What we want to do is get somebody who is really an expert on what we should put in there so it isn't a big maintenance headache and cost. There are some drainage issues with that have to be resolved. There's probably more than one way to do it. And whether we've got the money in the budget this year or it waits till next year, at least that's something that we want to do. And I know the dying trees are being removed. Hopefully they won't kill other ones, but whether we leave any of those trees or not, I think we could start with a clean sheet of paper and say, what would we like to have? We can't make a recommendation on this. It's on the agenda that we go forward with a landscape and drainage planner on Mojave Airport Drive.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Obviously, we're not blessed with an abundance of H2O, but I would think we could talk to, or somebody could talk to some of the nursery people in town and get some idea of a tree that would sustain life and greenery and not consume a great deal of water. That seems to me the most prudent way to go.
I think we've drained that bucket already. And not enough water, you haven't been out there when it rained.
Well, no,
We've got drainage issues on that street too.
exactly, but you don't have any control over when that happens.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And, you know, we could talk to some of the nurserymen in town and see what they think would be a good solution.
I think that's a great idea, and we're gonna have to run it through an expert probably to get the city to go along with it, and I wouldn't blame them. I wanna know that it was more than just a recommendation of the salesman at the nursery.
Right.
But it's a problem. It's not easy to find the right plant. Mosquitoes just tears the hell out of everybody that touches it, but that grows better than anything else.
Also, you may want to talk to the U of A Extension people. They do quite a bit with that, and they probably have some ideas too.
That's an excellent idea.
Yeah, that's true. And I've passed that on, I believe. Do we have a motion on this issue, or you just want to let it sit at this point? Okay. Drainage issues. Do you want to talk about that?
Certainly. And let me
I'm
go.
not sure just which drainage issue that is, we're talking about there. There's more than one.
Yeah, no, this, and I'll jump into that here in a second. Just going back a couple steps back to my report, a couple things I want to mention. There have been a concern or two raised by occasionally tenants in regards to what the maintenance workers at the airport do, because a lot of times you don't see them around. And just to give you kind of a general idea of some of the things they do, and I'm looking at my notes here, which are hard to read. Last week, I think it took about 3.5 days. Any of you flying at the airport probably noticed there was a notice to airmen in regards to the PAPIs for runway 17, which were out. They didn't work. And in essence, what we are blessed with is a staffer who understands high voltage, has had training in it, and basically he managed to troubleshoot 1.25 mile, actually no, it's 2.5 miles because there's 2 wires, 2.5 miles of wiring to find out one little item that's shorted out against a handhold to fix those lights. Now, you can imagine if we're talking about a staffer and he's using about 3/4 of his time during the day over 3.5 days to figure this out, imagine what you would pay a high voltage electrician that has to come out of another town, more than likely, to go out there and troubleshoot this. So, I mean, that's one thing, and probably one reason why you don't see him around a whole lot is basically the fact that, no, he's out there doing that. Some of the wiring in the terminal, he's had to be sucked into that because he has the history of that and helping the contractors. Another dynamic that you've probably all noticed out there is roughly an acre worth of property, and it's 2 properties actually, where we've removed brush, concrete piles of limbs from dead trees and stuff over by the EAA. You'll note that all that stuff is gone, to where we can actually do something with that lot now. Once there's another structure out there we need to take down. But again, that was probably a project that happened over a couple of weeks. Bits and bobs and all that sort of stuff. So enough of that. Into drainage. Just giving staff the the kudos that they deserve, plus all the weed spraying and constant sagebrush cleanup we're doing every time the wind blows. So in regards to drainage, about a week and a half ago, we had a decent rain event in the morning. It was on a Wednesday. Bennett and myself got in the truck. I grabbed a camera because we don't have that much rain, but when it rains, you can really see what a mess our drainage is out there. So drove around, spent about 2 hours driving around the airport, did much of Flightline Drive, Mojave Drive, Eastport Way, parts of Finance, North Olympic Drive, and Interstate. And what we noticed out there when we're driving around and taking photographs is that probably about 70%, and when I say this, not so much Mojave Drive as some of these other roads, probably about 70% of these areas, when you go out and drive them, what you'll notice is that the road actually has become the lowest point for water. So in other words, the roads are the waterways. And the edges of the roads, what you'll notice is probably anywhere from a 4 to a 6 to a foot, 6 inch to a foot of turf that's grown up over many years, which basically the lowest point's the road, so the water pools in the road, and you have a mess. So my guess basically is about 70% of those problems, and I say 70% because there'll be some where there's going to have to be major work done, hundreds of thousands of dollars to put in some sort of drainage under the road to get from one side to the other. But a lot of this stuff, we can probably, over time, rent some equipment, a large tractor, go out there, and in those right-of-ways, with hopefully approval from the county, blade that back to where when we have the rain, the water runs off the road into this area we've bladed. And again, this would only be for about 5 or 6 years, and it's gone. If you've driven down by Important Corners at their current location, you'll notice a little test we did down there where we basically went in, and that turf was probably about 1.5 feet high. Plus there was concrete and all sorts of other lovely stuff that was in there that we didn't see. We went in there and scoured that out, and that was one of the reasons for me going out in this rain event, and the water just runs right off the pavement into the dirt, gone. So I just wanted to give you kind of a heads up about another litany of projects that we'll probably be doing in little bits and bobs over time to improve things over there. Doesn't mean that we'll fix everything. And again, Mojave Drive on the west side, that's going to be a major project because the drainage there is grossly inadequate, and we've all seen it. On the other side, just a little bit of blading back and lowering the land there, and that will probably fix it on that side. But there are going to be a few other areas where it basically is going to take somebody to come in and engineer, and again, we'll supply them with the photographs to where they can see just what happens when it does rain out here. You really don't get a sense of any of this until there's a really good rainstorm, and then you're just sort of, oh my God. So, any questions?
Well, in addition to the drainage that you're talking about and those improvements that need to be done, you're right, the maintenance and repair side of things have been brought up many times amongst folks in the airport community. And while I don't think anybody would question that the atmosphere of cooperation at the airport is changed, 180 degrees since the airport authority was there, one of the big points that the airport users group made in their protests about what were going on is there were really no measurable terms of how things are being done there. And in the bullet points from the workshop from June 29th, one of the items on there is good policy. It says policy will produce a measurable and positive outcome. And one of the questions that's been brought up and discussed by many people at the airport is that we really feel like ultimately there needs to be a system of people reporting problems, whether they be maintenance, repair issues, then a methodology of triaging those items, whether they're a safety concern or maybe a higher priority maintenance item or a lesser so, but just some intake and then some method of resolving those issues and reporting back in some method that the public or airport users can see that those items have been addressed or triaged in some form or fashion. I don't know if the city, we've had some discussions, I believe the city has a system of some sort for public works, that there may be some similar thought process or a way that things get in that they're treated and handled and dispatched. And we think that there needs to be some system like that that everybody understands for the airport. So we go, hey, I see a problem. What's the proper method for this to go into something that gets looked at and addressed in the appropriate priority level, I guess is the way I'd put it. Gary, were you going to say something?
I certainly agree with you, okay? I can just tell you that. So Steve and I have already had this conversation, and you are right, in Public Works and in Parks and Rec, they have a similar thing for the accountability pieces for getting this stuff done. So I would, let's just put it this way, we will work on that. And then maybe by the next meeting, we'll have a little bit better view of that for you. Because there should be a way to say, all right, if, for example, you were to say that I saw this bump in the road. You know, what did we do about that bump, and when should we have it done and be able to report back? Something that I'd like to see, I don't know if the city's going to adopt it or not. In Lake Havasu City, they put in a thing a couple of years ago where it's actually, you go into a website and you can report roads, damages, and things like that. And I tried it one time on some painting on some rails that I thought was, you know, really starting to look bad. And what it did is it came back to me and told me when it was going to be done and then when it was done as a concerned citizen. So I don't know that we can go maybe to that extreme, but I certainly concur with you, is that there should be a way of accountability. Yeah, we should be accountable.
Yeah, I agree. My profession, I'm in the service, professional service industry, and we have to manage things. People would ask for us, usually in a matter of hours, not days or weeks in my business, but it's just a matter of things being accounted for. It's great that people now feel welcome to go over to the airport administration building and tell somebody if they have a concern. That's a huge improvement, no doubt. But ultimately, I think, yeah, we would like to talk, and probably as a policy issue, discuss some things and consult with Steve and you, Gary, about what we think may be practical approaches to that, so that we can build up to something where, yeah, you report it and you know it's going to be put into a thing that will get addressed. And some things are, like I said, some things may be safety, life issues that need to be addressed immediately, like electrical issues, as you brought up. That would be something that goes right to the top and it'll get dealt with. And then some things are just like, hey, this needs to get fixed sooner or later. And we understand it. You can't run and jump on everything. Your crew has priorities, as you've discussed, Steve, and we understand that. There's only so many people to do so many things. But yeah, I think a number of the members here would like to see a system built, and we'd like to work with you on that.
We may not have to reinvent that wheel, so.
Well, Tim, I totally agree with you, and seeing as how I'm at the airport all the time, I get a lot of the calls, especially if nobody's in the office on the weekends, and I'm a little closer to the fact that it's put out the fires and react rather than plan and act. And one example, and it's just an example, I got an email about a pothole. As you pull into the EAA gate to put in your keypad, your left front tire's in a big hole. Now, they just put millings in there. So you could go out and put some more millings in there, and that kind of seems like the logical solution. But I've been around here a little longer, and I know what the problem was. Several years ago, we had a 4-inch water main break, and there was no pressure in the industrial park. It turned out it was out past on a fire hydrant line past the context. But it was raining pretty hard. City people came out, and exactly at that hole, water was coming up. Now, a 4-inch is not that. It's 10 fire hoses. But they didn't see anything else driving around, so they started digging. And down there about this far, is an iron pipe, and the top's broken off of it, and the water was coming out of there. Now, it obviously was picking up rainfall from somewhere. And what was that pipe for? And who's gonna build on top of it? And what effect will that have? So I told Steve, don't fix it until you can go down there, it's dry, and you can fill it full of concrete, and it'll stop coming up. But ultimately, we gotta find out where that line goes, because it goes over towards Blumenthal's, but it could come out at Burge's hangar, it could come out at the sheriff's hangar, and I can't believe it's a sewer line, but I'm not sure that it isn't. And the last time we had a big sewer problem out here, they put in stuff out in front of Burge's because his hangar got built on the top of the line, and the line was plugged. And so all those buildings over there, including the EAA, had porta potties for quite a while. But they never fixed much on the other side, they just reconnected it. So I would never say that is not a sewer line, but it just picks up somehow rainwater too. So now, how many hours or days is he gonna spend on that before he gets it figured out and fixed? And it costs money to track that down. We don't have a backhoe now, or yet. So there's the kind of problem that pops up, and it seems like a real simple thing. Just go get a few shovels of some gravel and throw in there, and that'll fix it. I've been involved in too many of them where it just was the straw on the camel's back.
Well, I think that also ties into what I was suggesting, that if there were a system that is reported and recorded, the members on this commission may be able to have access to peek at that. And there's a lot of historical background, and it gives that point. We go, hey, it's not just a regular pothole. Believe me, I found it. I was late for a meeting at the airport. I drove up to there, punched in my keypad, the gate opened, and I pulled forward and had a big surprise. There was a big hole right where your tire goes. But anyway, it's very helpful that there are people at the airport that know history on that stuff. So if somebody does report it, we go, hey, by the way, or make a comment, that problem, you should know that there was a broken water pipe underneath that. And who knows, there's probably hundreds of other stories like that. But if once we get a system going, I think it would be very valuable to have folks that have been there so long to be able to help out with those things. So.
Totally agree.
One comment, just to tie in, on the roads and the flooding or whatever, I just want to make sure we tie in with the county on that and county engineering, so they know, they'll say, okay, to alleviate this, let's bring a grader out, we'll do a cut here. Oh no, we're gonna have to do more. Again, you get some expertise on what they've done before as part of our maintenance.
Okay, announcements by commission members. Anybody have any announcements?
I have one. In fact, I see some of the members here from Kingman Modelers. They're holding an Aviation Day event, Fun for Kids, this coming Saturday at the model airfield on the airport property at 10 a.m.
You all know there's been an issue about the modelers and their FAA's position on that. We thought it was all settled. That came out of LA. It was
Commissioner,
supposedly,
watch how far you take that, since it's not agendized, Carl. Just to make sure. Okay, I'm
Is
sorry.
this an announcement, or are you trying to?
no,
Yeah,
no,
it can't-
it was just kind of a report, an update, but it's not, we could just let it
Because
go,
there's
we don't know anymore.
Yeah, just-
It's up in the air.
Sorry, thank you.
So it was supposed to be finalized, but it's not. is
Well,
what it comes down to.
there's, maybe. Nobody else has anything? Yes?
I noticed in reading over the minutes that there was some conversation about name badges, and I believe you were gonna check with the city and see if that made any sense.
Were you talking about for your pocket? Or are you talking about out here at this event?
I'm not sure what I'm talking about, because I'm reading it out of the minutes from the last meeting.
Oh, okay. But on these, I believe Sandy made them once upon a time.
We'll look into that, sorry.
Okay, so maybe next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.